And I'm sharing my screen, so I trust that everyone can see what I'm presenting on. Welcome, I'm Karen Camosa Hawkins. I'm one of the faculty in the school psychology program and the director of our school psychology program at LMU. And we'll just be providing a little bit information about our program today, and then we'll have an opportunity for you to ask any outstanding questions you might have at the end of the brief presentation that I'm going to give. So if you have questions, maybe just jot them down or make note of them. And then you'll have an opportunity to either ask or put your questions in the chat. Here with me today is Cheryl Hugo. She is our admissions counselor. So some of you may have already reached out to her, been in communication with her. So she's here to help and make sure all of your questions get answered. Anything that I can't answer, she definitely will be able to. And then also joining me is Devin. And Devin, I don't know where you are. I don't see you on my screen anymore.
I'm right here.
There you are. Hi, Devin. So Devin Robinson is in our year 2 online program, and she is one of the leaders in our Graduate Association of School Psychologists and a cohort leader. And she's also a graduate assistant for our program. So Devin's here to kind of help answer any questions and just help me kind of through and navigating Zoom today. So let's get started. So welcome. We can't welcome you too many times, apparently. So just a little bit of an overview on the program. It is a 3-year cohort program. So if you end up applying to the program, you will have to choose whether you want to be in the on-campus program or the online program. And so you are admitted to one of those 2 programs, and you complete the program with the same cohort of students. So you start and complete the program and take all of your courses with the same cohort or group of students throughout the program. Our on-campus and online programs are exactly the same. The only difference is really the modality in terms of how we deliver the instruction. So on campus, obviously, are your traditional courses offered on campus. Online, we do have at least 50% of the time you spend in class is face-to-face on Zoom. So in a situation like this with your classmates and your professor, and you're engaging in a lot of discussion and activities, learning activities, some lecture, but there's just a wide range in terms of how we deliver the curriculum, but the same exact curriculum and expectations for both programs. So in our 3-year program, you will actually earn a master's in educational psychology at the end of your 2nd year. And then at the end of your 3-year, you will earn the EDS or specialist degree in school psychology, along with the pupil personnel services credential or clear credential in school psychology. And the reason we do that is just so that because our graduate program is 3 years, it's a bit longer than other master's programs. We want to make sure that you kind of end up where you need to be on the salary table or schedules with school districts to sort of maximize the salaries that you make once you complete the program. So also, once you complete the program, you will be eligible to become a nationally certified school psychologist, as well as a licensed educational psychologist. So the NCSP is something that is offered through the National Association of School Psychologists, which we are accredited by NASP. And then the LEP is just a license that the Board of Behavioral Sciences in the state of California offers. And after you've practiced for a few years, you can choose to get that additional license on top of the credential if you want to practice sort of independently or outside of the school setting. So as I mentioned, there are 3 years in the program. You take the same courses. In year one, the courses really focus on foundational knowledge and skills. And in year one, we actually start to introduce some field-based assignments in order to enable you to connect theory with practice. So we want to get you out there in the schools and applying what you're learning as soon as we can, as early as we can in the program. In year one, courses will be in the evenings. Throughout the program, courses are in the evening, excuse me. But in year one, we try and keep your courses to 2 to 3 evenings a week. So you can expect to either be on campus 2 or 3 evenings a week, or logging on to Zoom 2 to 3 evenings a week. Most of our students in year one of the program, they do work full time. It is a pretty rigorous program, so some people actually might only work part-time, depending on your circumstances. But you can certainly maintain a full-time job. You just need some flexibility in order to complete the field-based assignments that are required in year one. So just something to keep in mind. In year two, our courses focus on building your knowledge and your skills connected to practice. So again, you will have courses 2 evenings a week, and we try to keep it just to 2 evenings in year two, because 2 days a week you will be at a school placement completing your practicum, which is a total of 500 hours across the fall semester and the spring semester. Which pretty much equates to 2 days a week. And in year two, you actually have smaller classes for practicum and counseling supervision. So our cohorts typically are no more than 20 students in a class. But when, for the more intensively supervised classes, related to your practice, those courses are usually about half that size. In year two, you are able to maintain part-time employment while you're balancing the practicum placement with your part-time work. Working full-time is probably pretty challenging in year two. That said, some students, somehow kind of work it out and maybe piece together a couple part-time jobs on top of practicum. In year three, you are not able to have any other job because you will have a full-time internship working in a California school district. And you need to complete at least 1,200 hours, which essentially equates to about 40 hours a week throughout the school year. The courses in year three really focus on the depth of your knowledge and skills. And you actually take less courses in year three. You have an internship supervision course and then another 1-unit course on top of that. And you also take the Praxis 2 exam, which once you pass that, which is a requirement of the program, that is essentially what enables you to be eligible for the NCSP, that national license. The national certification, excuse me, not license. So just to give you a sense of internship in year three, and perhaps give you a little bit of peace of mind in having to maybe quit your day job in order to do your internship. A lot of our interns make some sort of money for internship. And you can see here on the slide that out of 32 interns for 24-25 this coming school year, 12 of them are making at least $97,000. So they are making the first year salary of a school psychologist for those school districts. Another 13 students are making a stipend for the year, which ranges anywhere from $12,000 for the year up to $40,000 for the year. And then we do actually have, I think, about 7 students. I can't do the math that quickly while I'm talking, but I think there's another 7 interns this year that opted to take an unpaid internship. Sometimes it might be that they just weren't able to find a paid internship, or, the paid internships usually are much more competitive. And sometimes people just make that decision for themselves. They don't want sort of the pressure that comes with having a paid internship. The expectations tend to be a little bit greater when you are operating sort of like a full-fledged school psychologist. There's sort of that level of expectation in terms of workload. And so some people just make that decision to just kind of focus on their learning. And, they have different circumstances where they don't need to have a salary. All right. So next up, I wanted to just highlight for you our learning strands in the school psychology program at LMU. And it's our learning strands that really make us, that are unique to us and make us sort of stand out from other graduate training programs in school psychology. I mean, perhaps there is probably some overlap with other school psychology programs. But I think we do a great job of really integrating research, theory, and practice, and really supporting your development in terms of gaining the knowledge and skills that you need to be a future school psychologist. And all of these are aligned with the NASP 10 domains of practice. Another leadership strand that we focus on throughout our program is leadership development. So we are training our graduates to be leaders in the field. We actually all are quite passionate about making sure that school psychologists take on a leadership role in schools, to be effective not only in providing individual level services and small group interventions, but also to bring about systemic change in our school systems. Another learning strand has to do with self-care, stress management, and burnout prevention. So this is really important, and we emphasize this throughout the program. Our interns in year 3 are actually logging self-care hours. That's how seriously we take it. And actually, the California Teaching Commission, CTC, another one of our accrediting bodies, expects that we have our interns sort of logging those self-care hours as well, because they know how important it is to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves, managing that stress, and preventing the burnout that can come just in terms of the work that we do as school psychologists. Being a school psychologist is a very demanding profession. It's also very rewarding. But we want to make sure that you embrace and kind of learn how to balance work and life so that you can actually be effective in the work that you do and don't get burned out, working so hard on behalf of students and families and all of the other school stakeholders. Lastly, actually, I shouldn't say lastly because there's 5 learning strands. We also have another learning strand, positive mental health, motivation, and resilience. So I think historically, psychology has focused more on a deficit model. There's definitely been a movement in psychology, the field of psychology as a whole, towards more strengths-based. But we definitely have shifted the paradigm and really kind of focus on teaching more research-informed, evidence-based practices that really focus on building students' academic, social, emotional resilience so that they can be successful in school and beyond. And then last, but definitely not least, is social justice in action. So social justice is such a huge part of our curriculum at LMU, and such a huge part of what we believe school psychologists should be focused on in the schools in terms of really supporting students and families. And so we make sure that our graduates really have a deep understanding of just kind of all of the historical and contemporary issues related to the various societal and educational disparities and inequities, racism, heterosexism, ableism, sexism, other forms of discrimination and oppression that really contribute to inequity. And so we want our graduates to be really truly aware and engaged, actively engaged in practices that are disrupting the status quo and cultivating a more equitable and just world. So again, throughout the program, you'll see that there are, you'll be reading about this, you'll be discussing this in coursework, in classes with your peers and faculty. You'll have various activities related to this and assignments and requirements throughout the program. So here on this slide, just some pictures that sort of capture the LMU difference. I would say what we do really well at LMU in our school psychology program is we're very hands-on. All of our faculty really care a lot about our students. We want you to be successful in the program. We want you to be successful and effective and competent out there as future school psychologists. So we really closely monitor our students and provide what support we can throughout the program so that you make it through successfully. Again, it's a rigorous program. There's a lot demanded of you. There's a lot demanded of school psychologists. So we want to make sure that you are well prepared to go out there and do the great work that school psychologists do. So in the pictures here, we have, one of our faculty members in the upper left-hand corner. Actually, he retired just about a year ago. But he is with some of our cohort members, a past cohort. And it mentions here GASP family groups. And GASP is our Graduate Association of School Psychologists. It is a student-run organization. If you are a member, if you are in the program, but there are various leadership opportunities related to GASP, as well as leadership opportunities related to the California Association of School Psychologists and the National Association of School Psychologists. Some of our students are presenting at conferences, presenting with faculty at conferences. They're involved in faculty research. And it's just, a very well-rounded sort of graduate training to prepare you to be a school psychologist. We also, our program really relies heavily on the Jesuit traditions. We are a Jesuit institution of education, and so we are very focused on the whole person, social justice, advocacy, and activism. Those are principles of, the Jesuit traditions that we take very seriously and are part of LMU's and the School of Education's mission statement. So we really provide some good, solid training. LMU has an excellent reputation in Southern California in particular. And now that we've expanded and we have the online program and are reaching other areas of California, our strong reputation is only growing, and we've expanded and have a lot more district partners that we work with. All of our graduates end up employed in school districts throughout California. And so, there is a shortage of school psychologists currently in California and pretty much nationwide. So I don't foresee you having any issues finding employment once you graduate. And in the bottom right corner, there's a picture actually you see of some of our candidates with also some parents. We have one of our courses is focused on families and collaborating with families. And one of our faculty members, Dr. Tisa Aceves, her research is related to this, and she happens to teach that course. And this is actually from an event where it's a graduation from this program that our students get involved with and have an opportunity to sort of apply those that knowledge and skills that you're learning in the program. And in the upper right-hand corner is, it looks like there's at least a few of our faculty members in that picture. And some of our recent grads, I'm trying to see if there's some of our current students might be in that picture too, but they went and did a 5K run. And I think it was an opportunity to do a fundraiser and just kind of socialize outside of class time. So that's, one of many activities that GAS planned for the various cohorts to participate in. Oops. There we go. And this picture here is just some of our current year 2 candidates. I see Devin in the picture. So Devin, like I said, is in the online program. I think a lot of the students in the picture here happen to be from the in-person program. But definitely, we try to get everyone involved in the various GASP activities and events that they plan. And actually, Dr. Barbara Kadich is shown in this picture as well. And she was a new faculty member with our program who started just last year. All right, so now it is time for our Q&A, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see all of you. And if you want to raise your hand and ask any questions, or if you want to throw them in the chat, Devin and Cheryl are going to help me monitor the chat to make sure we don't miss any questions you might have.
Hi, Karen. It's Jacob.
Hi.
I actually had a question for you. So, I'm assuming we'll figure this out, once, if I get accepted or whatever, but speaking, too far ahead of myself here, but I was wondering, how do we get connected to a school district for the internship requirement? Will it be kind of assigned to us through the program, or how does that work?
Yeah, great question. So we actually have one of our faculty members, Dr. Dawn Richards, is our field work coordinator. So Dr. Richards meets with all of our year 1 candidates about December-ish of year 1 and starts kind of talking about practicum and practicum placement. And so she provides all of that advisement and lets you know who we have existing partnerships and memorandums of understanding. And then if you are interested in some district who we don't yet partner with, then she works on kind of working that out and works with you on figuring out, where best. But ultimately, we have to approve those placements. And so she works very closely with all of our candidates to make that happen. And then she also provides advisement at, around the same time in year 2, leading up to plan for internship in year 3. And then let me even back up, because we have the field-based assignments that come up in the spring semester of year 1. So she's actually already communicating with our new students for year 1 to make sure that everyone has a place to do those field-based assignments. So you're not really, you have some freedom to sort of pick and choose where you want to do your field-based training, but we also provide a lot of support in that regard.
Cool, thank you.
Sure. I see some questions. Okay, Carla, you're asking when the interviews for the program take place. Okay, so I feel like these are questions I want Cheryl to answer for me, but I know, right? The first Friday in February is our priority application deadline. And shortly thereafter, I was actually just looking at this today, Cheryl, in terms of looking at when we're going to do our admissions week or interview week. So we do review all of our applications, and then we invite some folks for interviews. And that usually happens, I think it will happen early to mid-March.
Yeah, this year we did a March 4th and 5th. So it's usually the first 2 days, first week of March.
Yeah, and I think it's going to get pushed back a little because of our new academic calendar this year and where spring break falls. So I feel like it might be a week later this year.
Okay.
And then how important is research-based experience when looking into potential students? So I would say we really look holistically at all of the applications. And so we want to admit students that have, experience, whether it's in research or in the schools or other community-based, if you have experience working with children, I think that it would be a good thing to get. If you haven't already gotten that experience. And so research is just another, bonus, definitely added on to your application, and will make you stand out. Sorry, now I'm like getting distracted by the chat. So I think, if you have had research experience, great, that looks good. I would say if you haven't had research experience and you haven't had experience working with children, you might actually prioritize getting some experience working with children. If you can get research experience between now and then too, great, but I would prioritize getting experience working with children if you don't yet have it. Let's see. Prerequisites. Thank you, Devin. I think you shared a link related to the prerequisite classes needed for the application.
Excuse me, Dr. Hawkins,
Yeah.
I want to add something to the prereq. So obviously, I believe it says on the website, if you have a school psych, child development, education major, you're set. You don't need to look at classes. Sometimes, so let's say you don't, and you're looking for those specific classes, you may not find classes that are exactly titled that way. So what often will happen is someone will email me, to our admissions email saying, I found this class, will this count? And so I'll take a look at the description and let you know. Because it can be confusing sometimes to find there's not a class called cognitive theories or something. So you can feel free to reach out to me, with the classes if you do need to take them that you think you're going to take, and I can confirm that they're okay.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl. Mia, I'm hoping I adequately answered your question about experience required for candidates. And then we do not look at GRE scores, those are not considered as part of our application or required. Another question is asking about the CBEST and whether that's required. There was actually a new law just signed in where by Governor Newsom, that we now actually your undergraduate degree, probably 9.9 times out of 10 now will count toward that basic skills requirement. So you probably in all likelihood don't need to worry about the CBEST as long as you've graduated from a regionally accredited school. Let's see, theory not required, SOE. Are there recency requirements for the prerequisite? That's a great question. As far as how far back we go, Cheryl, to look at coursework.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a,
Yeah.
No one's ever asked me that question before. I don't know.
I am not sure either, but what I will say is I know sometimes people come in with a master's degree in a related area and they ask us to look at whether there's any coursework they can transfer in. And I do know that we will look maybe within the last 10 years at any coursework, but anything older than that, we won't consider transferring in. If I have an MBA, BA, both in international business plus early childhood permits issued by CTC, do I need to have all psychology requirements completed by deadline? I've completed stats general. So that, Marissa, you have a very specific question. And I don't want to spend the time reading your whole question here. So I'm going to let Cheryl look at that and reply. And it might be that you just connect with Cheryl following today's info session, and she can probably speak a little bit more about your specific scenario and circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. Marissa, go ahead and email me. I put my email in the chat and we can discuss that.
And it looks like Devin responded to the question about tuition, financial aid. We do have, you know, we have program scholarships that folks can apply for. And there are other, you know, options. I mean, the Golden State grant, I know that funding is sort of drying up, but it seems like it still exists for now. So that's kind of a big question mark right now. But a lot of our students do take out student loans in addition to the scholarships that we offer. But there's lots of different ways people are funding their graduate education. Is the online program more competitive than the in-person? Interesting. Great question. Not sure I have an answer to that question. I would say, you know, now that we've had the online program a couple years, it's really hard to say. I feel like you know, one year it went one way and one year it went the other way as far as how many people were accepting into, you know, the offers that we made for each of the programs. I think you know, you need to probably apply for whichever modality sort of best suits your learning and what you think you'll be most successful. And obviously your circumstances will play into that as well. Okay, 3 letters of rec. In your experience, do you find it's best to take a gap year or have some students come in immediately after undergrad? I think it depends on the individual in terms of what you do. So I think some people throughout undergrad, you know, they got a lot of rich experience. That's part of their application. And then other people maybe, you know, it would be good to take a gap year because maybe you have limited experience or don't have a lot of experience outside of the courses you took as an undergrad. And so we have students in the program of all different sort of scenarios, you know, some people that completed undergrad later in life, some people that completed undergrad a while ago and are returning, others coming straight out of undergrad. So, I mean, there's quite a range in terms of circumstances and our student demographic in that regard. Looks like Devin weighed in on what she did. If we earned a psychology BA, do we need to worry about prerequisites? So in all likelihood, as long as you have the bachelor's degree in psychology, then you probably don't need to worry about prerequisites. And looks like Cheryl included the link to our information packet in the chat. Are there any other questions? Going back to self-care, stress management, burnout prevention, can you elaborate a little bit more about what that looks like? So, Devin, you want to talk a little bit about what so Devin just completed year 1 of the program and has started, you know, she's year 2 now. How has self-care, stress management, how has that sort of been integrated thus far in the program that you can think of?
Within the program, we have constant check-ins from our professors, kind of making sure that we are doing something self-care related. Sometimes our coursework will revolve around self-care. And then also we have, as Dr. Hopkins said, GASP members. So for example, I'm a co-lead and me and my other co-lead, we also do check-ins, just making sure that everybody is taking care of themselves. We try to put on events specifically for self-care. For example, that beach trip was right after our summer course, which was a little rough. So just letting us kind of like, you know, relax and just taking a break. But I would say it's depending on your cohort. My cohort is very big on self-care and faculty and staff are as well.
Yeah, so I feel like it comes up a lot in conversations. There's readings related to it. I know that there's faculty that do introduce various activities related to that in year 2. So Devin hasn't yet had those courses. So I know there's some activities that come up in the counseling coursework in particular. And then definitely during practicum in year 2 and internship in year 3, that's something we talk a lot about. And there's a lot of sharing of various strategies and ways of sort of approaching from the training program to, what's going to work moving on long term as you are practicing as a school psychologist. So, Dipti, I see your questions just about the variety of programs in the School of Education. And in our department, we actually, it's the specialized programs in professional psychology. And we have the school psychology program, which we're talking about here today. And then there are some counseling programs as well. And so those are completely different programs in the same department within the School of Education. So I certainly encourage you to explore those and sort of explore both career pathways. And so if you go on nasponline.org, that's the National Association of School Psychologists website, there is a plethora of information that gives you a sense of what it is to be a school psychologist, the various domains of practice. And then a similar professional organization for counseling would be the American Counseling Association or the American School Counselor Association, or ACSA. So I encourage you all to, if you haven't yet settled on school psychology and are still trying to kind of figure out what's the best path for you, I encourage you to look at those professional organizations' websites just to do a little more research and digging into what is the difference between these career tracks. And yeah, and I noticed, Devin, your response just in terms of school psychologists tend to work more with the special education population. And I agree, but I also sort of disagree. And so I do think school psychologists work with everyone at the school. But the difference between a school psychologist and a counselor is a counselor, and it depends what kind of counselor you are in a school, and what type of counseling you're doing. And some of it might be more of the academic advising and scheduling part. And then there's other types of counselors providing individual and group interventions. And school psychologists can do all of that, provide counseling to both general education students and students that are receiving special education services. But they're also doing assessment, and they're doing consultation, and they're doing, a whole lot of like program evaluation and other things. They work closely with the administration and families and community organizations. So there's really a lot of kind of richness and a wide variety of professional activities for school psychologists. Does the online program have any hands-on opportunities? Networking? Yeah, we definitely try to help facilitate, the networking, connecting you with alumni, and then obviously the different cohorts. So when you are part of GASP and you are connected with GASP, as you all will be once you're in the program, you interface with people, year 1 interfaces with year 2, interfaces with year 3. And there's a lot of kind of mentoring and support that goes on between the cohorts as well. Okay, and then the question, about the online courses, and Devin pretty much responded to that. Every professor, every course is a little bit different in terms of the hybrid aspects. I would say count on at least 50% of your time being face-to-face on Zoom. It doesn't mean you're necessarily face-to-face on Zoom with the entire class. Sometimes it's with a smaller group. Sometimes you're meeting with faculty individually. So there's just a range of ways that the curriculum's delivered. But sometimes we do have asynchronous weeks where you're doing learning on your own, and there's different modules you follow or different activities you're doing independent of time spent with the rest of the class or with the faculty. So there's lots of different ways that we deliver the curriculum. Let's see. Can you elaborate on what career options look like with an EDS in school psychology as opposed to a master's? I'm not really sure at this point how many school psychology programs only offer a master's degree at this point relative to those that offer the EDS above and beyond the master's. But either way, it's the credential in school psychology that will ultimately allow you to work in schools. And because we are a NASP approved program and there are all of these competencies that you need to meet in terms of being a school psychologist in the 10 different domains of practice, that fits into, the 3-year program. But the EDS is just going to, as I mentioned, sort of help kind of boost you in some instances on the salary schedule or table. It just depends on how the districts actually do their salary schedules. School psychologists are sometimes on a separate schedule, so then it doesn't matter as much. But the EDS is just that specialist degree above and beyond the master's. 95% of their work is writing reports. Yeah, and I think, Kevin, you replied to that comment from Marissa about to local school psychologists saying that 95% of their work is writing reports. And I agree wholeheartedly with Devin that it really depends what school district you end up in. And I always encourage all of my interns when they're looking for future jobs to interview the district as much as they're being interviewed and making sure that they find a place that's a good fit for them. So some folks, are really enjoy doing assessments and writing reports. Other people prefer to do more counseling and interventions. And, it just really depends on the individual and kind of what those districts, how they prioritize and what they look at in terms of the role of school psychologists and how many school psychologists they actually hire per school and in that district. So the role does really vary from district to district. Yes, as a school psychologist, can you count on writing reports and conducting assessments? Yes. I've never known a school psychologist who does not do assessments or writes reports. That said, I do know school psychologists working in other capacities in roles that don't demand assessment as much. And I know a lot of school psychologists that go on and become school administrators and work in other capacities outside of a more traditional school psychology role. LMU has a number of programs. I feel like that's the same question. I don't know, maybe I scrolled up too far. Prepare graduates to pursue their licensure in school or educated. Does this allow more flexibility to work? Okay, so upon completing our program, you are automatically eligible to have your NCSP, to have that national certification. The national certification is nice if you might someday move to another state and there's reciprocity between California and that other state. It's much easier to sort of just practice in that other state. It's an additional sort of credential. It's nice to have. The LEP, the license in educational psychology, is what you will be eligible to apply for once you've been practicing for a few years as a credentialed school psychologist. currently in the state of California, the Board of Behavioral Sciences requires only you take a test, you pass that test, and then ultimately, once you pass that test and complete the application and pay the fees, then you have your license. You have to get continuing education to maintain that license, but it does allow you to work outside of the schools. I don't know if I've missed other questions. If you've put a question in the chat and you feel like it hasn't been adequately addressed, please let us know, raise your hand or speak up. I feel like it's hard and we often miss something after so much ends up in the chat. And even if you haven't put anything in the chat and anything's coming to mind, you can certainly raise your hand as well. Elisa.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, I had a question because I was reading a lot about the NASP programs or the being accredited versus being approved. What is the difference between those two? Because I am planning to finish school here in California, but there is a very high chance I might be moving to Arizona. So, I have read, like, aside from your program, there are others that say accredited versus others that say approved. Is there a difference between those two?
Yeah, that's one of those sort of things internal to NASP that it really confuses everyone else. Essentially, we are a NASP accredited program or approved program. It's sort of one and the same thing. And the only difference is that we also, our School of Education has national accreditation by a different accrediting body. And so we go through the approval process rather than the accreditation process, because we already sort of fall under that accreditation umbrella, if you will. So we just need that additional approval from NASP that we have that national accreditation. Whereas other programs might not have a School of Education that is nationally accredited. And so they go through the accreditation route, which just it must be another layer to sort of those checks and balances to make sure that the School of Ed actually is sort of meeting all of their requirements for national accreditation, if that makes sense.
Got it. So either would still be fine if I were moving out of state. It's just different ways of going about it. Okay.
Yeah, and so it really just, it's more the training programs that have to worry about which they need. Whether they're NASP approved or NASP accredited, it really is the same thing when it comes down to it. And ultimately, you would be graduating from a NASP approved program and you would be eligible for that NCSP. And it's the NCSP that matters more so, when you go to move to another state. And there are some states that don't necessarily recognize the NCSP or don't have that reciprocity with other states. And so we have some graduates who have left California and gone to other states, and they just have to go through, their state accrediting body, like the California Teacher Commission that we have in California. They go through the same sort of credentialing body in that state and follow whatever requirements they have. And it usually is there's, forms they have to complete and documentation you have to provide. I would hold on to all of your syllabi from your graduate program, have your transcript, have, just kind of keep your documentation if you think that you might be moving to another state at some point in the future.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Sure, no problem. I think there's more questions. Regarding classroom experience, do classroom observations count as experience? Do you guys have a preference for how classroom experience looks like? So I would say, if you haven't had experience in classrooms, like certainly observing classrooms and kind of having a sense of how classrooms operate, and the different roles and functions of the professionals within that setting. But I would say getting experience working with children, whether it's in the schools or outside of the schools, is really something that we appreciate that our students have, just so that you have some exposure and experience kind of going in. I think it just brings a greater richness to your learning as you're going through the program and gaining more experience through our field-based assignments and your practicum and internship.
Dr. Hawkins, I think there's this question that keeps getting missed because they keep popping up all over. Could you give us some examples of other companies or employment opportunities we could work for outside of the school district if we obtain licensure as a school psychologist?
If you obtain your credential as a school psychologist, you're pretty much restricted to working in the schools. If you obtain your license as an educational psychologist on top of the credential, then you could certainly work for, you could go into private practice for yourself, you could work for community agencies. There are certain stipulations of what you can and can't do as a licensed educational psychologist. But there's definitely a little bit more freedom to practice, like I said, outside of schools. I would say most people that have their LEPs are doing things independently, more so than necessarily working for another company or institution or organization. That's just been my experience and understanding. I know I have my LEP, and I know a lot of other people that have their LEP. So you don't automatically get the LEP at the end of the program, but by completing our program and then getting the experience as a credentialed school psychologist, then you are eligible to take the exam to get your LEP a few years out after graduating. And people with their LEPs, they might be doing independent assessments, independent educational evaluations. They might be providing consultation to schools, doing training, doing other types of interventions. They might be contracting with school districts or other community agencies to provide services that, you know, might be pretty typical to what a school psychologist does within the school. Let's see, what does research experience look like? There's such a range of the various research experience that you can get, whether as an undergrad or once you graduate from undergrad. There's lots of different faculty at all undergraduate and graduate institutions that are conducting research. So that's kind of the best and easiest way to sort of get involved in LinkedIn. And so, there's just such a range. You might be collecting data, you might be entering data, you might be analyzing data, you might be writing up certain pieces, you might be researching to find more evidence to sort of support the data that they've collected. You might be working on some sort of conference presentation or a journal article or a book chapter. I mean, it's kind of unlimited what research experience would look like. Let's see. Any other questions I've missed? And I would say, again, kind of going back to the research experience, I think research experience is great. I had experience as an undergrad and throughout my graduate training. I think people that want to go on and get their doctorate one day and want to end up, doing research or working as faculty in an institution of higher education, I would say those are the folks that tend to emphasize getting that research experience. But if you are looking to be a practitioner and work as a school psychologist or a licensed educational psychologist, then you're probably going to be more focused on getting the practical experience in terms of working with kids. But it doesn't hurt to get both experiences if both interest you. Let's see. Applications are not first come, first serve. Okay. School by attending my official children. Jacob, I'm going to let Cheryl respond to that question.
I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you. So anything specific to our admissions process and the applications, I keep kind of deferring to Cheryl because she's our admissions counselor or admissions guru. She's the one sort of managing that whole piece for us. But I obviously work closely with Cheryl and am very much involved in the admissions process. Thanks, Cheryl.
Just saw that. Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so they do need to be in sealed envelopes, though, if they're hard copies. They have to be official, which means they need to be sealed in the envelope.
Cool.
If somebody hasn't ordered transcripts yet, do them electronically. It's easier for everybody. But if you do have a hard copy that's in sealed, you can forward those on to us.
Okay, and I should just put it inside of another envelope then, so I don't rip apart the original.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like we are just about out of time. I have on my phone, it says 5 o'clock. My computer says 4:57. I don't know what the official time is.
It's 5 o'clock.
You have 5 o'clock. So it looks like we're out of time. Marissa, I just saw your question come through. When is the deadline? Sorry if this is a, yes, the first Friday in February.
Right, but that's not the first. I believe it's the 7th this year.
I believe it is the 7th.
Yes, so it's the 7th.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you all for joining us and thank you for your interest in LMU School Psychology program. If you come up with any questions after today, please direct them to Cheryl. If there's questions that she can't answer and it's something that I could better answer or even a student could better answer, then Cheryl will let us know and she'll reach out to us and put you in contact with the right person.
Thank you so much. And Cheryl, I'm sorry about me being old school. I just like snail mail.
That's fine. That's fine. It's not a problem.
Okay.
It's easier usually for people just to do electronically, but
Yeah, and I wasn't sure originally, but I will.
no, it's fine. No
Cool.
worries.
Thank you.
Of course.
See you later.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thanks.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Oh, let me stop recording.